Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take those big, complex sources and really boil them down to give you a practical blueprint you can use right away. Today, we're tackling something fundamental, self-mastery, and specifically how that leads to, genuine inner stability. The sources we're drawing from today are surprisingly actionable. They don't just float around in theory. They actually define self-mastery and give a pretty clear framework for getting there. So our mission here is to cut through all that motivational fluff and give you a structured path. Think of it as your blueprint for keeping stable inside, no matter what's swirling around outside.
Absolutely, and that stability is so critical. The sources define self-mastery not just as one thing, but as this ongoing process, right? Understanding and developing yourself across, well, three layers. Your physical body, your mental processes, and of course your emotional landscape. It's like a three-legged stool. And what's really key here, the idea we probably need to tackle first, is how this inner mastery connects directly to your outer life. The sources are really clear on this. Self-management, getting a handle on those three layers, is basically step one. It's an absolute prerequisite if you want to effectively manage other people or situations.
Okay, wait a second. I feel like I need to push back on that just a bit. Because we see people, leaders even, who seem incredibly successful externally, right? In business, politics, wherever. But you get the sense they're absolute chaos agents internally. Maybe brilliant, sure, but volatile. Doesn't their success kind of prove the prerequisite isn't always needed?
That's a fair point. But the sources would likely argue that what you're seeing there is, let's say, external competence that's running alongside a significant internal debt. They might manage a huge company, yeah, but maybe they can't manage their own temper. Or they win an election but are drowning in anxiety. So while they might achieve things, that lack of self-mastery almost guarantees, well, inefficiency at best, and definitely suffering for them and the people around them. That inner stability is the real difference between leading effectively long-term and just burning bright and burning out. It's about sustainability versus exhaustion.
Okay. That definitely reframes what success might mean. So if self-management is this non-negotiable foundation for sustainable leadership, whether you're leading a giant company or just, your own life, where do we start? You mentioned those three layers: physical, mental, emotional. The sources seem to point to one clear starting line.
They do. It's the mind. That's the control center. And the training itself, well, the concept is simple. The practice, that's the hard part. It's about conscious, vigilant, internal curation, basically actively choosing to feed your mind constructive, positive, useful thoughts. Only those.
That sounds incredibly difficult, especially when, let's be honest, our minds often feel like they're on autopilot, just generating worries or replaying mistakes. How do we make that practical beyond just think positive?
Right. And the sources offer a really helpful analogy here: the mental diet. Think about it like controlling your food intake for your physical health. You choose what you eat. You need to choose what you think. If you constantly consume mental junk food, say, endlessly comparing yourself on social media, dwelling on old resentments, rehearsing worst-case scenarios, it leads to internal volatility, stress. Just like actual junk food makes you feel sluggish and unwell. The key is spotting those empty calories in your thinking. So for you listening, it's about catching yourself in that moment you start comparing your life to someone else's highlight reel online. Or when you mentally replay that awkward thing you said 5 years ago. These thoughts offer zero nutrition, right? The discipline starts right there, noticing, and then actively swapping them out for something constructive, even if it's just shifting focus back to the task at hand.
That's a powerful metaphor, the mental diet. But thoughts feel trickier than food, don't they? I mean, you can physically choose not to pick up the cookie, but how do you intercept a thought that's become automatic, intrusive, maybe based on years of habit? It feels like the diet idea breaks down when thoughts are reflexive.
Exactly. And that's precisely why the sources don't just stop at practical mind training. They push us further into philosophy. Because if all you're doing is trying to force positive thoughts over negative ones, you're just locked in this constant internal battle. It's exhausting, and you're still completely identifying with all that mental noise.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. We move from the practical how-to into, deeper philosophical ground. These ideas often draw from ancient wisdom traditions that tackled this exact problem. So what's the big philosophical shift? What's the core realization needed to get beyond just struggling with the mental diet?
It's a pretty radical idea, actually. The core insight is this: we are neither the body nor the mind. The real I, your essential self, is something else entirely. It's often described as a detached witness, separate from the constant stream of thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations. It's the counterintuitive idea that the voice narrating everything in your head, well, that's not actually you.
Wow. Okay, that goes against a lot of modern thinking, doesn't it? Psychology often puts thought and emotion right at the center of identity.
Hmm.
So we're supposed to see our stream of consciousness as just a mechanism, not our essence.
Pretty much, yes. And this shift in identity isn't just some abstract concept. The sources argue it's absolutely crucial for reducing suffering. Think about it. If you believe you are your anxious thoughts, then every time one pops up, it feels like a direct threat to your being. You're trapped right inside the whirlwind. But if you cultivate this witness perspective, the observer, the real I, you can take a step back. And that detachment is what allows you to start observing your own conditioned patterns, your automatic reactions. What are those patterns? Well, that instant defensiveness when you feel criticized, that habitual craving for external approval, or maybe that immediate slide into despair when things don't go your way. By just observing them without judgment, they start to lose their grip because you realize it's the pattern running the show, not your conscious self making a choice. You shift from being the passenger tossed around by turbulence to the pilot observing the instrument panel.
That's a huge shift. Moving from fighting yourself to just watching the internal machinery operate and takes you out of victim mode and into observation. Gives you that critical distance. Okay, so we have this powerful philosophical base, the observer self. But that understanding alone doesn't magically create stability, right? It needs work. So moving from the idea to the day-to-day reality, lasting inner stability isn't just from an intellectual insight. What does that consistent, disciplined effort actually look like?
Right. It demands what the sources call disciplined inner work. This is the practical side of being the observer. I mean, continuous practice. Specifically, things like awareness and mindfulness practices. The goal is simply to be present more often, to know what your mind is up to without immediately getting swept away by it or judging it. Think of it like your daily mental fitness routine, a workout for your awareness muscle. And the benefit of this discipline, if you frame it as building defenses against inner chaos, becomes really clear. It stops you from being compulsively jerked around by every external event or every internal craving, that endless cycle of wanting something, getting it, then immediately wanting the next thing. Someone without this discipline is always chasing the next promotion, the next compliment, the next distraction, just to feel okay for a moment.
Yeah, that external chase sounds exhausting. And that difference finding stability inside versus constantly seeking validation outside feels like the absolute core of self-mastery versus, well, self-delusion. Discipline builds that internal refuge.
Yeah.
Okay, so discipline builds the structure.
Yeah.
But what about cleaning house emotionally? To really live stably in that structure, the sources talk about a crucial emotional piece needed to kind of clear the decks. What is that?
Forgiveness. That's the emotional heavy lifting required. Specifically, forgiving yourself and forgiving others. This is presented as the mechanism for letting go of regret, for cutting those energetic ties to past hurts or mistakes. Regret isn't just a bad feeling. It's like this neural loop that keeps tethering your present peace to something that already happened. Refusing to forgive, whether it's yourself or someone else, means you're essentially forcing yourself to keep reliving the pain. And forgiveness, in this context, it's less about saying bad behavior was okay and more about a radical act of self-liberation. You're choosing to stop letting yesterday's emotional garbage, your own mess-ups, or what someone else did, contaminate the quality of your inner life today. That clean emotional slate, which you achieve through forgiveness and maintain through discipline, is what allows for that positive engagement with the world the sources talk about. It makes it possible.
That ties it all together beautifully. So let's recap this blueprint for everyone listening. We define self-mastery. It's about developing yourself across those three layers: physical, mental, emotional. We establish the fundamental prerequisite. Manage yourself first. Then you can effectively manage anything or anyone else. Sort of physician, heal thyself, right?
Exactly. And then we laid out that four-step framework. Start with the practical, the mental diet, choosing your thoughts. Then the crucial philosophical shift, realizing you are the observer, not the thoughts themselves, followed by the disciplined inner work, consistent awareness and mindfulness, and finally achieving that emotional freedom through active forgiveness, letting go.
And the payoff for you, the listener, is pretty profound. Mastering yourself drastically cuts down on suffering because you can see those stressful automatic patterns instead of being run by them. And crucially, it makes you far more effective in your interactions, your leadership, your engagement with the world around you.
Which brings us to a final thought. If these sources are right, if self-management truly is the prerequisite for managing others effectively, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? When we see leaders, people in positions of power, whether in governments, big organizations, even in our local communities when we see them struggling, making volatile decisions, causing widespread frustration, How much of that failure isn't really about their policies or their intelligence, but stems directly from a fundamental lack of inner stability, a lack of self-mastery? Something to think about as you observe the world. What's the real cost of internal chaos, not just for the individual, but for everyone they impact?